can we even trust the data that we're receiving? What is the global environment that we are operating in today from a geopolitical and cybersecurity threat level, not only just from nation-state actors, but also including cybercrime groups backed by nation-state governments?
We wouldn't have the jobs that we have today. We wouldn't have the companies that we have today if it weren't for globalization, because we built a global world of technology that's so intertwined.
There's an increasingly complex cyber landscape, and which most of it is right now influenced by nation-state actors and non-nation-state actors.
I'm more worried about a phishing link than I am about a big malware attack, and that's coordinated by a sophisticated actor. Human error is the biggest issue, and if you have an environment where human error is just the norm, we have a big problem.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our panel this morning. We're going to be talking about cyber on the global stage, defending against geopolitical threats. I have two very wonderful panelists with me today. My name is George Al-Koura, the CISO at Ruby Life, and a longtime regular on the CyberX program. Today is not about me. I'd like to spotlight our panelists because it's women in cyber, and we have two very wonderful experts here. I was wondering if we could get some introductions to start. If we could start with Shilpa, please introduce yourself.
A little bit about me. I've been in cybersecurity for 16 years now, and mostly in the IT industry space for almost 20 years. It's been a great journey. Navigating all aspects of cybersecurity, whether it's cybersecurity architecture, operations, threat management, risk and compliance. And I'm very interested to talk about the topic today because this is something I've been researching a lot, and I think it's on everybody's mind for the last couple of years, and especially last few months. So I'm very excited to be here.
And Lela, please go ahead.
Hi everyone. Lovely seeing you again. My name is Lela, and I realize I forget everything I've done unless I'm on one of these panels and I have to introduce myself. I completely blanked. When we were talking previously, I had a previous life and a previous career in diplomacy and the nonprofit world, and I worked in nonprofits in Cyprus and Bosnia, even in the UN buffer zone between the Greek and Turkish part of Cyprus, and all my education is in politics. But I kind of got tired of politics is often a gray area, and anything can be the right answer. And I slowly transitioned into tech simply because of that, and because I had some technological talents that these nonprofits could use. So I slowly transitioned into cybersecurity. And I mean, it's been the best decision, but it was a career switch. And that's why today's topic is really, really relevant and something close and dear to me. But ever since watching cybersecurity and technology, I worked in anything from A/B testing to data privacy to regulations. And now I work for TD, and I've been with TD for so long that I forget everybody else I work for because it's going to be 6 years probably in November. And I'm the senior information security specialist for TD Securities, but it's a pretty fantastic role because they've enabled me to specialize in different aspects of cybersecurity, and the most recent one is AI. So I think between the three of us and with the topic today, we'll hit all the notes.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining, guys. Thanks for introducing yourselves. Let's start off with this initial question. Let's set the stage. What is the global environment that we are operating in today from a geopolitical and cybersecurity threat level, not only just from nation-state actors, but also including cybercrime groups backed by nation-state governments? Go ahead, Shilpa, you can start.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, George. And when I look back at it, I'm a very statistics reliant person. So the 2025 Global Security Outlook, and that came from the WEF, is there's an increasingly complex cyber landscape, and which most of it is right now influenced by nation state actors and non-nation state actors. The escalating geopolitical tensions obviously have created a lot of uncertainty. There's increased integration and dependence on complex supply chains, and the environment has become very opaque. It's a very opaque risk environment. The other thing is the rapid adoption of emerging technologies, and Lela just touched on into it, and I'm sure we're going to delve into it later. Is AI-based attacks is introducing new vulnerabilities that obviously the cyber criminals are exploiting with a lot of great sophistication and scale. I was looking at some stats yesterday, and there's a 72% increase in cyber risks according to the global cybersecurity outlook survey, which they did, I think, recently. And the cybercrime is both growing in frequency and sophistication. Includes your ransomware attacks, your AI enhanced tactics, deep fakes. Obviously, we've all seen that emerging quite a bit in the past one year. And then obviously all of this with the tariffs, the traditional, environment we are in, the little bit of an unsuitable geopolitical environment we are in. There's also a notable increase in supply chain attacks. And just to add a little bit more to it, like it when I think about it, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the landscape was different. Obviously, we were seeing, with the geopolitical threats had increased since 2022 when the Russia-Ukraine war started. And then obviously there were other threats being added into it. The other war started. But then I think the state changed literally sometime late last year, where there you started seeing, an erosion of trust, sorry, in the traditional allies, right? So which we had never thought about before. So the trust among traditional allies like Canada, US, and other ally countries, right? This and the European Union, with cyber espionage is becoming more friendly between friendly nations, is become more common between friendly nations, which was never an issue before. This is a completely new risk we've seen. The tariffs obviously has seen affected both adversaries and allies. They have complicated relations. They were really built on trust, but it's a very unspace safe right now, where we don't know, can we really trust the information coming in, whether it's through NATO, through Five Eyes, where I think we're still there, but how long are we going to be there? How that, these triggered events, especially through tariff and trade tensions, diplomatic disputes, and then, the national interests are very different than they were a year ago, right? Specifically speaking, in Canada's, context, we have a completely new, diverging national interest with our biggest ally today, right? And this creates obviously a baseline of mistrust in these allied relations, specifically with our most trusted partner, as nations are aware that they may be monitoring each other's internal deliberations. Now, that was something that was really unheard of a year from now. So this fusion of trade policy and cyber strategy has really reshaped our cyber warfare, right? And that is, I think, I know it's a long-winded answer to where we are today, but that is where the cyber geopolitical threats space looks like. And I'm pretty sure, Lela, you've had a lot of experience in cyber diplomacy. This may be a complete shift that you may have seen a few years ago when you were in your cyber diplomacy career, that the risks that we are talking about today are completely different, right? Who would have thought at the time? So I don't know, what do you think is, from your perspective, how are you viewing it?
I mean, you summarized everything so well, and I'm like, I don't have much to add, but you are correct about, I think the uncertainty is sort of what permeates everything that you said, right? We're sort of in these uncertain, unprecedented times, and I'm an older millennial. I'm so tired of unprecedented times. I'm begging everyone, we need some precedented. I can't do this anymore. But it is quite a new environment, and we're now calling it. It's sort of a completely different. It's a post World War II. It's a deviation from the post World War II order that we've known for so long. So we are in this era of paranoia.
Mhm.
It's the best way to call it. But that paranoia and that sort of uncertainty also leads to a lot of isolationism.
Yeah.
And we're going to see that, and we're already seeing that a lot of countries, simply because they cannot trust these alliances that were created, they cannot trust their neighbors, they're going to start isolating themselves. And that means, and that just doesn't work in the world that we have built. Because whatever your opinions are on globalization and how that has gone, we wouldn't have the jobs that we have today. We wouldn't have the companies that we have today if it weren't for globalization, because we built a global world of technology that's so intertwined that now separating it and creating isolationist entities within that world, that's going to be impossible. How are we even going to route network traffic? How are we going to physically move data centers and servers in order to fix that? That's not going to work. But I can confirm again, back to that uncertainty, that is going to make it more difficult to defend smaller companies, because are we going to be sharing data the way we have been? Not even between US and Canada and the Five Eyes and everything, but if the big world leaders are now this unsafe in a way, and this on shaky grounds, what's going to happen to small countries like mine, like Bosnia and Herzegovina, like Serbia, right? We're also sitting there going, what do we do in this case? Who do we trust? Who has our interests in mind? And I can tell you that I'm not a Westerner, quote unquote. I'm not Canadian. I was fully born and raised in the Balkans, and for us to see, I mean, I remember working in diplomacy, working for the US State Department some 10 years ago, and just this environment would have been unimaginable.
Oh,
Even
100%.
for me, as someone who's completely separate from it, right? Who viewed this as, these are some relations of some countries that we are not a part of. I couldn't even imagine that we would be having these types of tensions. So it translates into uncertainty everywhere. And I think it translates also into, it's going to be really difficult for companies that are cross-border, that are multinational, that do have that global reliance. If there is an increase in this type of paranoia, in this type of push to protect according to national borders. So it's definitely made everything a little bit, everybody feels a little bit pricklier, if that makes sense. It feels a little bit more tense. So that's
Let's carry on with that theme. Let's carry on with that theme and talk about the loss of trust institutionally, particularly with our primary ally. Lela, let's start with you. Where do you see the partnership going based on your experience with that government? And can we even trust the data that we're receiving from an intelligence or defense agency to an advanced agency or intelligence agency standpoint? Is our ability to have, we'll say, harmonized perimeter continental protective operations now going to be called into question as a result of this particular administration and the roots politically that have allowed an administration like this to take hold of power? And I'm saying it's not just an issue of this administration ending. If you go from this administration to another administration in the same party, you're really going to continue to see a trend of the same thing. What do we do with that as Canadians? Lela, start.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even have to, talk about the U.S. I can talk about my own government, right? My own Serbian government, which I'm happy to criticize, because the way you love your people is you ask them to be better, right? So when you do have a government that cannot entirely be trusted, is not cooperative with their allies, I mean, the problem is that it creates an environment internally as well, where your data may not be correct, where you may not be elevating the people you need to be elevating to expert positions, right? If there is sort of a move towards anti-intellectualism, towards anti-experts, I mean, who is in these positions? And we've seen instances from the US, we've seen instances even internally in my own country, where people are just very callous and they're not potentially the best at what they're doing. I mean, we've seen war plans being sent out through signal chats and everything else, which, if it's a false flag, great job. Like, that's, Georgie made that point. That's that's a great move, but you can't really trust them. And what always worries me and in these types of governments is that any type of dissenting voice is being quieted. Any type of opposition tends to be quieted. And as a result of that, people are not going to voice their feedback. They're not going to try and improve things. They're just going to sit pretty and kind of try and do the best that they can to survive. And there's a statistic that, when we were chatting, I'd mentioned there's a book by Malcolm Gladwell, and he did a study into, there was a bunch of plane crashes that happened in the 70s and 80s in Latin America primarily. There were Latin American airlines, and the planes just kept crashing. And they didn't understand why. There was nothing wrong with the tech. There was no underlying cause. And then they studied the actual voice recordings from the cockpits. And they realized that what would happen in these companies, in these airlines, simply because of the culture at the time in the countries, is that the power differential, the power dynamic between the pilot and the co-pilot was so bad that the pilot would not accept any feedback from the co-pilot. And, when the co-pilot would be like, that's going off, we shouldn't be doing that, the pilot would not listen, or the co-pilot would stop even trying to correct the pilot, and the plane would crash. So my concern is not even in, our technologies, our R&D department's going to be gutted or anything of that sort. For me, it's the people. That's what really, really worries me, because most of our issues, and we even know in cybersecurity, I'm more worried about a phishing link than I am about a big malware attack that's coordinated by a sophisticated actor. Human error is the biggest issue. And if you have an environment where human error is just the norm, we have a big problem. Shilpa, I'm sure you...
Shilpa, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And then I think one thing that I have noticed in the changing landscape that we've seen right now and Lela, you brought a good point about the governments not really doing enough, right? Our own governments, or, the example that you gave before is there's also the sense of 10 years 10 years ago, didn't matter where you stayed, there used to be a common platform for a state to adopt for the betterment of that country, right? Or betterment of that nation. It didn't matter whether it is this government or that government, some of the fundamentals remained the same, right? They were so, and coming back to cybersecurity, like for example, when we look at some of our allies, the previous government focused on cybersecurity. This government says they want to focus on cybersecurity, but the approach is very different, right? In what has really happened is in the past 10 years or so, or 5 years or so, I think the global landscape, the way it has become for most of the nations is very, it's not, it's no longer a common platform for most nations. It's more personality driven. So if you have a leader who has a personality that's very different from the previous leader, the common platform goes out of the window, right? And then they start looking at things from a very different perspective. To giving the example of the recent cuts we saw with CISA, right? And the whole world was thinking, oh, what are we going to have? Are we not going to have the CVE guidance? And we rely on them a little bit. And the country or the economy that has a leverage over technology obviously sees this as an economic leverage for other countries, right? So if most of the technologies and those aspects are coming from, say, North America, and then they are deployed, those technologies are deployed from North America, whether it's the innovation that's happening in cybersecurity, the innovation that has happened in before, or the innovation that has happened in, say, AI developments, the the country feels that they can use this as an economic leverage. And then what really happens is that there are countries that have a nation state cyber espionage policy and the others that don't. What this uncertain environment does it, you will also see countries that never thought about, say, attacking a Canadian government organization or a US government organization because they did not have an active cyber espionage policy, now have to open and do it for their survival, because the world has been skewed so around, because there's one power that has the technology, the other power is coming up right now. And then there are these checks and balances in place, whether through tariffs or other ways, where I think except AI, the competition is really skewed, right? In the AI, the developments are still happening. And then there are, at least the people who are developing it are saying, okay, we understand a deep seek has come in, and we know there's an open AI, and we should maybe collaborate together for the betterment of everybody. But that's also because we are in that race. Does it apply to other areas? We don't know. It's a very uncertain environment right now. So I wish we could go back to not personality-driven agendas, but nation-driven agendas, nation-building agendas, that we used to have before. And, we can work with our allies better. And then we don't create enemies that weren't our enemies before. I think that's something probably would settle down. I don't know, George, what do you think?
The reliance on the U.S. has been massive, but
Yeah.
the thing that concerns me is, some of these things. It's easy to switch from one endpoint detection and response system to a different one, right? To move your enterprise over, we can do that. You can move it to a European solution or anything. The part that concerns me is that so much of the world's infrastructure is in the U.S.
Yeah.
From data centers to, even if you look at the number of under ocean cables, basic internet infrastructure, it's really difficult to move, re-engineer. So many of those cables, they land on U.S. territory, as opposed to Canada has maybe 2 or 3 of the tier 3 cables that land on our soil. The rest are in the U.S. So how do we switch that, right? Because that will impact your network speed, that will impact the way you route traffic. Canada doesn't really have network sovereignty in that way, because so much of the world's traffic does go through the U.S. I mean, it could be any other country, right? We built this reliance on them, and if there is any type of hostility or any type of tension with that country, suddenly you have the data of your nation flowing through a country that may not be the friendliest. So that's a problem. So the infrastructure portion really worries me. I do think that what Canada needs to do isn't just R&D, developing software, investments, everything else. I think a lot of this new age is going to be literally building. It's going to be steel and tractors and construction, right? It's because even if you want to compete in terms of AI, and we brought that up a couple of times, and sure, there are different verticals within AI, and we've noticed that countries are buying most of the surveillance AI from China, simply because China has specialized and they've had a much bigger data set to train those models on. So they're the best in that vertical. The US is better at Gen AI or agentic AI or anything like that. Canada has an opportunity to specialize in one of those verticals as well and kind of become the world leader. But even in order to do that now, you need data centers, because we now know that the models are dependent. Your model is as big as your data center, and they have to start building them. So it's going to be a case of literal infrastructure and trying not to have that reliance on them. But another thing that it's already happening, and this isn't anything new. Canada started doing it. We're going to have to turn to other countries. We're going to have to turn to the EU. We're going to have to turn to China, to India, to a lot of big global players that have simply been ignored because of, worldviews. And some of it is almost, is racism, is colonialism, is a lot of things. And there's no reason not to look at other allies and not to switch over to them and not to partner with them. And the thing that the US did so well for so long, and I was a part of that as well, is their cultural diplomacy. I mean, the myth of Apple, the myth of Silicon Valley, there's a reason why everybody views the US as kind of the hegemon in terms of technology. Some of it is 100%. The best minds went there, developed fantastic solutions. A lot of it is the myth that was created around it. Or a lot of it is just that. It's just Hollywood and their cultural diplomacy that they ran for years to be like, our products are the best. Look at our lifestyle. Look at the way we work. Look at the way we build. This is why you should be using us. And they did really create this supremacy. I don't know if anybody can compete with that, to be quite honest, because it's been 50, 60 years of just that, of creating this myth of the US. And in a way, it's good for things to equalize, but it is in certain times. And Canada has a great PR program, that's for sure, for the rest of the world. I don't know if we can compete, but I think there's a lot of bright minds. There's still a massive amount of people from all over the world that want to come to Canada to live and work, and we should leverage that. But it needs to be a mindset shift of, we can't just rely on one partner. We need to look in other places. And again, this is hard for companies that are cross-border, but that still doesn't mean you're exclusive and you can't cooperate with other places. But if Canada has an opportunity, I would really, really explore what vertical within AI is the one that we can be global leaders in.
Yeah, and I think I'm positive, because I know Alberta is building some, at least AI data centers. They've started the journey there, which probably may be a good shift from some of their oil economy, right? So they won't be so dependent. So they're coming up in the tech space. I think it's the one thing that, Leila, you bring to my mind is, what is Canada's national identity, right? Do we really have one? We are a mix of, we are a conundrum of, various cultures and everything. And just like US, has that identity that they built in. So you go to any stadium and then you're in a game and everybody is like USA, USA, right? That builds a culture of excellence, a pride in the place you're living in, and then supported by, a lower risk appetite with so much seed money coming in. You are allowed to fail. I think Canada needs to adopt some of the good things from that. Like, what do we want to build as a nation, right? We want to be the best place to live in. I hear that a lot these days, like from everybody. But how do we get there? We get there by opening our markets, right? Taking risks. You get there by investments. You have to build those investments. And I'm positive with the step that at least Alberta has taken. I think we will start seeing some of those investments in the AI data centers. I think we have a long way to go, right? But it has to be like an overall building exercise. It's going to take a few years, but I'm sure we can get there. And I remember, George, you were talking about one of the innovative products you're working on with yourself. I don't know if you want to, which is completely core-bred Canadian, if you want to just give 2 cents about one of those innovations that at least is happening.
I actually cannot. We have 30 seconds left. I want to close it off.
Okay.
One cool fact about you guys, the nerdiest thing about you guys that you could share to our audience. Lela, go ahead. You first.
The nerdy thing, this is embarrassing if you want, but I still use Tumblr to this day. I'm still on Tumblr. Do not go looking, but I still
And Shilpa, yourself?
Okay, Lela had an interesting one. Mine is a pretty boring one. I maintain a personal threat intelligence library where I collect and categorize usual attack vectors that I've encountered over 16 years. And then I've documented 200 unique attack patterns, complete with code samples and defense strategies, all meticulously tagged and, cross-reference in a custom database I built. So it's very boring, but that's my nerdy self.
I'd say that's acceptably nerdy and very good. So thank you very much, Lela, Shilpa. You guys have been wonderful. This has been a wonderful CyberX panel, and I think I'm ready to hand it off back to our team. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you for having us, George. It was a lovely discussion.
yeah. Thank you, everyone.